Hey, what's up, guys? It's Coach Tim. So today I wanted to cover basic coverage recognition. This will kind of fall under the entire umbrella of understanding what defenses are trying to do to stop an offense. This is so important to understand as an offensive player is knowing what the defense is trying to do, because now we can start to understand and decipher what the rules are on defense, what their responsibilities are, and ultimately, if we understand that, then we can predict how they're going to react to certain personnel, certain formations, certain concepts, certain depths of concepts, and certain routes. And when that happens and we can accurately predict that, we can set them up for failure and set ourselves up for success as an offense. So, again, I just threw a lot of things out there, but ultimately it comes back to understanding what's going on with the defense. So we need to learn about defense as a quarterback and understanding that. So again, this is going to be the basic coverage recognition portion. So you got to have a solid foundation and understanding of what's going on defensively here. This is probably meant more for, I would say, middle school level kids that are probably more advanced as quarterbacks. Guys that are in high school that are starting should have a pretty solid understanding of this, especially at the varsity level. If you don't know about this stuff already, and you're playing high school football as a quarterback or even as a receiver or any offensive player, you should start learning these things as a quarterback or as a receiver at the high school level at a minimum. Earlier the better, which is why I'm starting to do these videos, especially for my younger guys. So you guys that are 10, 11, 12, definitely pay attention to this. I don't expect you guys to memorize all of this yet, but it's definitely good to learn this over and over and over again so that it becomes ingrained in your head, and you can recall it and understand it a lot quicker when you're actually in game-like situations. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So today I'm going to cover why basic coverage recognition is so important, talk about pre-snap and post-snap very, very briefly, and then we'll kind of go into what I call my whole process flow, which is safety identification, looking at the corners deal and looking at the backers deal. And deal ultimately stands for depth, eyes, alignment, leverage. I got to give a shout out to Coach Stover, a really good friend of mine, great receiver coach, great teacher, one of the best receiver coaches in the area, if not in the nation. And he was the one that I learned this from. I don't know who he stole that from, but I'm stealing this from him. And it is What is the Deal? And it used to be Del, DEL, but we added the A because it sounds a lot better. So what's the deal? Depth, eyes, alignment, leverage. We'll talk about that in detail as well. So let's get started. So the first thing is, before we learn all this, why is it important? Ultimately, it comes down to 2 points. One is if you know what the defense is doing and you can decipher all the information quickly before the play, it will lead to faster decisions, and it should also lead to better decisions. So again, faster decisions, better decisions. Second thing is pre-snap, post-snap. Pre-snap, what you see should help you and give you a clue as to what they're going to do post snaps. Now remember, and especially once you start getting into college and the NFL, what you see before the play and what you see after the play could be vastly, vastly different. And so you could have, and especially in the NFL, they love bringing all these guys up to the line, look like they're going to blitz, and then all of a sudden they drop 8 into coverage and only send 3. So there's a lot of situations like that. You got to be able to decipher as a quarterback at a minimum on the back end, what are they doing as far as coverage goes? Are they doing a cover 3? Are they doing a cover 4? Is it a man coverage? So understanding what they're doing in the background and how they're aligned pre-snap matters and helps give you a clue as to what's going to happen post-snap, which again dictates faster decisions and better decisions, or should lead to, I should say, better decisions and faster decisions. So I covered the first two topics. Now we're going to get into the detailed process flow, or at least what I like to call the process flow. So I'll attach this in the Google Classroom as well for you guys to look at. But I've basically created this whole flow, and it starts like this. So the first thing we want to do, I'm going to take this away for a moment, is we want to look at safety identification. So we've got an offense here. Let's say they're in 2x2, quarterbacks in gun, and you've got a back that is offset. Okay, first thing we want to do when we're trying to figure out what the heck type of defense they're running right now is, if this is the line of scrimmage right here, I want to look at the 10-yard mark. And I should make a note down here: normal, down, and distance situations. Why is that important? Because I think this number and these rules change depending on where you're at on the field. But if you're in a normal down and distance situation, let's say 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, and you're on your own 20, or you're on the 50-yard line, or you're on the either the 40-yard lines going in or coming out, I think that this definitely applies. Once you start getting into the red zone, or you start getting into the goal line, now these rules change a lot, and defenses will change. We'll talk about that in another video. But for now, we're talking normal down and distance. And really what we're looking for is we're trying to identify safeties. So here's my simple and possibly oversimplified rule is 10 yards. Whoever's sitting at 10 yards or more, anybody in this area, we ID as a safety. Okay, to start. Now, in a lot of cases, you're going to see something like this, where you got two guys right here. In that case, that would be two safeties. You got a guy sitting at about 12 yards. You got another guy sitting at about 12 yards. They could be at 15 yards. They could be sitting right at 10 yards. Either way, there's two safeties because there are two guys sitting at about the 10-yard mark. So again, I'm oversimplifying, but that's my very, very basic rule for you young guys if we just want to get a snap judgment at it. So sometimes you'll actually just see this. You'll see one guy smack in the middle right over the quarterback. In that case, okay, there's one safety. Okay, now let me make a note about these safeties for a second. To me, the term safety in this case, when I'm talking about coverage identification, when I talk about safeties and IDing safeties and anybody over 10 yards, I could care less if on the roster, this guy here is labeled as a safety. I don't care if he's labeled as a quarterback, a safety, a defensive tackle, an offensive tackle, a kicker. If he's lined up back here at 10 yards or more before the play starts, I'm counting him as a safety. Okay, so that's my rule of thumb. Now, let's say that there's just one guy sitting here in the middle of the field. Okay, so my number of safeties is 1. So one safety, there's two terms I want you guys to understand when we talk about safety identification. There's, I go simple and I just say one high or two high. But a lot of other people use football terms like MOFC and MOFO over here. Okay, what does MOFC and MOFO mean? MOFC means middle of the field closed, and MOFO means middle of the field opened. Okay, so what does that look like? Here, theoretically, this is the middle of the field. And if there's a guy sitting in the middle of the field, well, now it's closed. Conversely, if we have two safeties, I got a guy here and I got a guy here, that middle of the field here is technically open. Okay, so that's why they call it middle of the field open, middle of the field closed. One high, too high. So I want you to learn both those terms because you never know which term you're going to hear. To me, this is a little bit simpler. But once you understand these terms, and I'll kind of rewrite it off here to the side. Once you understand these terms, then it becomes a lot easier to decipher what kind of coverage it is. And of course, I left myself no room to write. Okay, so it's over here down in the corner. So again, let's count the safeties. There might be two, there might be one, but generally pre-snap, counting these safeties is going to give us a good indication of what the coverage is going to be. Okay, so we talked about safeties. Now, and ultimately the deal with the safeties, depth, eyes, alignment, leverage, all of that basically we're calculating quickly by figuring out, is it middle of the field open or middle of the field closed. So in this case, their depth, aka anything over 10 yards, their eyes I wouldn't worry about too much. And then the alignment and leverage is a lot of that's going to be dictated on the alignment of our offensive guys, in this case, just a normal 2x2 formation. So this is going to basically tell us that these safeties are back here, middle of the field is open, and that's it. So we don't get a lot of clues by figuring out the deal, even though we kind of went through that process. So now we're going to talk about the corners. So I covered the safeties here. Whoops. And then now we're going to talk about the corners. So let's say I've got a corner sitting out here. So again, deal, I'm going to start running out of room here. Deal is looking at depth, eyes, alignment, and leverage. Okay, so if we're talking about this corner in particular, and I know we're drawing on a whiteboard, so it can sometimes be hard to tell. So depth-wise, let's say he's about 5 yards. Okay, so he's sitting at 5 yards. Let's say his eyes are at the quarterback right now, and let's say his alignment and leverage in this case is pretty much going to mean the same thing. So he's outside shade of the number one receiver. So now that we know that, and now that we know the number of safeties, that's what we started with, we can start to assume what type of coverage this is going to be, at least pre-snap, and we've got a pretty good idea. You've got two safeties out there. Once it's two safeties, now we're thinking cover 2, cover 4. We don't know if it's man or zone yet for cover 2 until we look at the corners and look at the backers. And once we look at the corners, we see him, he's off and he's outside leverage. Now we're starting to think, okay, it's probably not man. If it's man, he'd probably be here in his face or pressed up. And then that's also where we look at the backers and look at their deal to say, okay, is their deal telling me or hinting to me that it's man coverage as well? So same thing here. The backer's depth is about 5 yards. Eyes are probably inside at the quarterback. Alignment and leverage is inside of number 2. So in this case, I'm looking at this as a quarterback, and I'm thinking it's good old cover 2. Plain old vanilla cover 2. We want to try and hit that middle hole or the hole shots out here. There's certain concepts that'll pick on them, like smash and things like that. So this ultimately allows us to walk through a process, right, to figure out what that coverage is going to be. Now let's rewind and let's take a look at a different situation and walk through that. So now let's say there's one safety, still got a backer here, and corners back off here. So again, now it's one high, middle of the field closed. It's an odd number safety. So now I'm thinking it's probably an odd numbered coverage, cover 1 or cover 3 in this case. So now I take that information and now I go to the corners and I look at the corners deal. Well, the corner's off at about 7 to 8 yards. He's outside leverage. Eyes are on the quarterback. Okay, I can probably safely assume this is looking like zone coverage. And so I know from the whole process flow that I attached that if it's one high safety and the corner's off and outside, it's likely zone, which is cover 3, right? Now, before I move any further, let me just I'll draw out that process flow real quick for you guys here. So it's safety ID. I'll scoot this over a little bit. So if there's one safety like we set up here, then now I'm looking at the corners deal. And then based on the corners, if they're off and outside, then I'm thinking cover 3. If they're on and inside, I'm thinking cover 1, which is man, right? Same thing down here. If I see corners, now I'm looking at their deal. This one splits a little bit more. If they're on and inside, same thing. It's cover 2 man. This kind of splits down here. And now we're looking at the corner's depth as well. And so this decision kind of splits a little bit to say these guys are outside, but they're off, or they're on and outside. Sorry, it's hard to see. If they're off, and usually this is about 6 yards, then I'm thinking it's cover 4, which is zone. If they're on or they're under 6 yards, now I'm thinking it's cover 2, like we talked about here. Okay, again, zone coverage here, man, and a zone coverage up here. Sorry, my Z's start looking like 2s. Okay, so this is the process flow that we just went through for cover 2 and we talked about for cover 3. Okay, let's look at it for cover 1. Again, these corners are sitting here inside and up. Now we're thinking, okay, it's probably cover 1 man, especially if these backers come up. Now, again, let's go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is pre-snap versus post-snap. Okay, if I've got a corner sitting here that's up and inside, but I got a backer that's off and inside, this backer's not in great position to press the slot receiver. Could he be playing zone? Possibly, because that means this guy's going to turn and bail and get out of there post-snap. So post-snap, they could definitely disguise what they're doing pre-snap and then post-snap jump into something slightly different. But at least with identifying that there's one safety here and there's no other safety that can get back to cover the deep middle of the field, at least I've narrowed down my coverage options over here to say, okay, it's not anything down here. It's got to be one of these two coverages up here. It's got to be cover 1 or it's cover 3. And then I can decipher from here, okay, is it man or is it zone, or which one do I think it is before the play actually starts. So again, going back to the beginning, talked about why it's important, because you can make faster and better decisions, understanding the difference between pre-snap and post-snap. Pre-snap, this happens. Post-snap, things change. We're going to cover that in a different video, and where I should go and all these other things. A lot of things happen at post-snap, and so there's not enough time for me to cover it in this particular video. Process flow-wise, understanding and having a process. And I'll make one important note when I talk about this process. It's so incredibly important to be able to go through these steps quickly. Right now, it's easy for me to take 20-25 minutes to explain all this to you guys, but ultimately, the amount of time that you have to process all this information quickly pre-snap is probably in the order of 3 to 5 seconds. And so you want to be able to do this quickly and get a pretty good idea of where you're going to go so that you can speed up and make better decisions post snap, right? So again, talking through that process flow, safety ID, the 10-yard rule in normal, down, and distance, looking at the corners deal, depth, eyes, alignment, leverage, looking at the backers deal, depth, eyes, alignment, leverage. And this helps you spot some strange things. And I'll give one final example before I wrap up. So you may have a corner that's on like this, but a backer that's outside and up, or a backer that's outside and off. And this is one of those times where it may strike you as something's off about this, because he's not pressing his man, and usually in man coverage you want to be inside leverage of your man, because these defenders want to get between the receiver and the ball. And so in this case he's not, and so this makes me question, okay, is he really trying to play man coverage? Because this corner is telling me that it's man, and being one safety up here, it's telling me that it's cover one, which is a man coverage, but at the same time, this backer is out of position. So once the snap happens and the play goes on, if this backer doesn't immediately get over here, this guy can win inside and I can get him the ball right now, right? Which this guy's going to get yelled at. So to me, but a lot of times guys don't do this on accident, where they're just out of position on accident, at least not this blatantly. And so for the most part, guys know how to line up defensively. We got to give defense coordinators some credit. So if these guys know where to line up, then this guy's trying to cheat to get out here for some reason, which tells me that, hey, this guy might bail and it's going to end up being cover three. So just an example of ways that you can use these rules to your advantage to help you understand what's going to happen and predict and figure out what that coverage is going to be before the ball's even snapped. So hopefully this is helpful. Take a look at the quiz on Google Classroom. So I will get that up and you guys can take that test, and hopefully this will help speed up your decision making, speed up your understanding of coverages. So again, this is just the basics. I'll get into a lot more detail about different types of cover three. We'll talk about different types of cover two and the read coverages and some of these special coverages that you see. So again, thanks so much for listening and watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much.